What the Bible leaves unspoken about Canaan will profoundly shock you. Imagine a land where the very soil is stained with the blood of child sacrifices, where temples echoed with the sounds of unrestrained orgies, and where deities demanded the ultimate price, human life. Now prepare to uncover the harrowing truth behind God's unequivocal command to utterly destroy this civilization. The Promised Land, a beacon of hope for the Israelites, concealed secrets so deeply disturbing that many preachers and religious leaders shy away from discussing them openly. In this exploration, we will delve into the everyday existence of the people of Canaan, painting a vivid and unsettling picture of their lives, beliefs, and practices. Canaan was far more than just an arbitrary piece of land on an ancient map. Strategically positioned between the two most powerful civilizations of the ancient world, the mighty Egyptian Empire to the south and the sprawling Mesopotamian empires to the north, this region was inevitably the epicenter of the known world. Any merchant seeking to transport goods from the fertile lands of Egypt to the bustling markets of Babylon, or any army ambitious to conquer distant territories, was compelled to traverse the land of Canaan. This pivotal geographic location transformed Canaan into a crucial crossroads of cultures, ideas, and inevitably conflicts. It became a melting pot where diverse traditions clashed and mingled, often leading to both innovation and strife. The very geography of this land was in itself a divine gift. Along the coastal plains, the refreshing winds blowing in from the Mediterranean Sea brought life-giving rains, providing ample sustenance for the cultivation of vital cereal crops. The valleys nestled between the towering mountains created unique microclimates, perfectly suited for the cultivation of lush vineyards and bountiful olive groves. The Jordan Valley, blessed with its rich and fertile soil, yielded abundant harvests of dates, figs, and pomegranates, a veritable paradise of agricultural wealth. It is not without reason that God described this land as a land flowing with milk and honey, a potent and evocative metaphor for its exceptional fertility and abundance. From the snow-capped peak of Mount Hermon in the north to the arid expanse of the Negev desert in the south, Canaan boasted an astonishing geographical diversity within a relatively small area. The landscape ranged from verdant forests to rugged mountains, from fertile plains to barren deserts, each contributing to the region's unique character. But who were the inhabitants of this coveted land, so fiercely desired by empires and nations? Contrary to popular belief, Canaan was not populated by a single, homogeneous group of people. Instead, it was a vibrant mosaic of distinct nations and tribes, each with its own customs, beliefs, and territories. The Canaanites proper primarily dominated the coastal regions, establishing themselves as skilled seafarers and shrewd merchants, controlling vital trade routes and amassing considerable wealth. The Jebusites held sway over the mountainous region that would eventually become the city of Jerusalem, fiercely defending their territory from invaders. The Hittites, renowned for their advanced metalworking techniques originating in Anatolia, brought their expertise to Canaan, contributing to the region's technological advancements. The Amorites, known for their imposing stature and formidable strength, controlled strategic fortresses nestled high in the mountains, dominating the surrounding valleys. The Perizzites and the Hivites completed this diverse ethnic tapestry, each group contributing its unique culture and traditions to the complex social fabric of Canaan. The Bible specifically mentions 7 nations inhabiting Canaan, including the Girgashites and the Canaanites, further highlighting the region's diverse population. These peoples were not newcomers to the land. Archaeological discoveries have revealed that many Canaanite cities existed for over 1,000 years before the arrival of the Israelites. Jericho, for instance, was already an impressive walled city when Abraham still resided in Ur of the Chaldees, a testament to the region's long and rich history. One of the most defining characteristics of Canaan was its political fragmentation. Unlike the unified empire of Egypt or the centralized power of Babylon, Canaan operated as a collection of independent city-states. Each major city, such as Hazor, Megiddo, Lachish, or Jerusalem, had its own king who controlled the city and the surrounding villages. These small kingdoms were constantly engaged in rivalries and power struggles, forming temporary alliances that quickly dissolved as interests shifted. The Amarna letters discovered in Egypt vividly illustrate this political instability, revealing Canaanite kings desperately pleading for help from the Pharaoh against their neighbors. "Send archers, or my city will be lost," one desperate ruler of Canaan wrote, highlighting the precariousness of their situation. This political fragmentation created an environment of perpetual instability, where loyalty was a rare commodity and betrayal a common tactic. But here lies the great paradox of Canaan. How could a land so prosperous and developed be simultaneously so unstable and conflict-ridden? The answer lies in the region's very wealth. Precisely because it was so fertile and strategically important, Canaan constantly attracted the covetous eyes of neighboring empires. Egypt considered the region part of its sphere of influence and frequently dispatched armies to pacify rebellious cities. The Hittites and the Babylonians, in turn, also claimed control over portions of Canaan, further destabilizing the region. Internally, the wealth generated by trade created extremely unequal societies. While urban elites lived in luxurious palaces, the majority of the population eked out a meager existence in precarious conditions. This social disparity fueled constant tensions, frequently culminating in violent conflicts. But who were these people really? How did they live their daily lives? Let us now explore the day-to-day existence in Canaan, with revelations that few preachers dare to mention. Surviving in the Promised Land. Daily life in Canaan before the arrival of the Israelites in Canaan. The daily life in this land already throbbed with a unique vitality that many failed to recognize. At dawn in a Canaanite city, the sun rose over houses of stone and mud piled haphazardly upon each other along narrow, winding streets. Unlike modern homes, Canaanite dwellings were simple, typically consisting of only 1 or 2 rooms. The walls, constructed from sun-dried mud bricks mixed with straw and stones, provided natural insulation against the intense heat of the day and the chill of the night. The roofs were flat, made of wooden beams covered with interwoven branches, and a layer of clay. These terraces served as extensions of the house, where families slept on hot summer nights, dried grains and fruits in the sun, and sometimes even built temporary shelters during festivals. As soon as the sun began to climb in the sky, Canaanite women were already in full activity. Their first task of the day was to light the fire and begin grinding grains of wheat or barley in manual stone mills to make flour for bread. This was arduous work that could take hours. Meanwhile, other women from the house would venture out with ceramic jars to fetch water from the communal well of the city, an important social gathering where news and gossip were exchanged. The basic diet of the common Canaanite consisted primarily of grains. Flatbread, baked in clay ovens or on hot stones, was the staple food, accompanied by olive oil, olives, lentils. Fruits such as dates, figs, and pomegranates supplemented the diet, as did goat's milk, cheeses, and yogurt. Meat was a luxury reserved for special occasions and festivals, usually goats, sheep, or, for the wealthier, cattle. Wine produced on the slopes of the Canaanite mountains was the most common drink, often diluted with water to stretch its supply. While the women tended to the house, prepared food, and wove textiles, the men went out to work. The vast majority of the Canaanite population consisted of peasants who cultivated small plots of land in the outskirts of the cities. Early in the morning, they would depart with their tools, plows pulled by oxen or donkeys, hoes and bronze or iron sickles, to labor in the fields. The sweat of agricultural work was constant and exhausting, especially under the scorching sun of the Levant. In the cities, skilled artisans began their day in workshops that were often part of their own homes. Potters molded ceramic vases on manual wheels, creating containers for storing food, water, and oil. Blacksmiths hammered incandescent metals, forging agricultural tools, weapons, and ornaments. Carpenters transformed scarce and precious wood into furniture, doors, and various implements. Weavers converted wool and linen into fabrics, while tanners prepared animal hides for sandals and containers. At the top of society, local kings lived in palaces that were relatively modest compared to those of the Egyptian pharaohs, but luxurious by Canaanite standards. Surrounded by guards, servants, and advisors, these monarchs dedicated their days to resolving legal disputes, planning construction projects, receiving foreign envoys, and frequently preparing for wars against neighboring cities, almost as powerful. As the kings were the priests who administered the temples, performed rituals, and served as intermediaries between the people and the gods. Life in Canaan was regulated by the agricultural cycles, the time of planting, the anxious anticipation of the winter rains, the harvest, and the festivals associated with these events. When the harvest arrived, a significant portion went to the storehouses of the palace and the temple as tribute to the king and the gods, leaving many peasants with barely enough to survive until the next harvest. If you want to experience the divine protection that the Israelites received upon entering this land of contrasts, comment now. I trust in God's provision even in difficult times, and share this video so that others may also understand the divine plans. But beyond work and common life, there was something even stronger that governed Canaanite society. Religion, a force as powerful as it was disturbing, dominating every aspect of life. Forgotten secrets of Canaan. What history books don't tell. Amidst the ruins of the ancient Canaanite cities, archaeologists have discovered clay tablets with inscriptions that reveal a surprisingly complex world. Although the majority of the population was illiterate, there existed an elite class of highly trained scribes who mastered not only the cuneiform writing of Mesopotamia, but also developed an alphabetic system that would revolutionize written communication. The Egyptian influence was so strong that many Canaanite nobles sent their children to study in Egypt, learning hieroglyphs and bringing back knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. This cultural exchange created a society where knowledge was power, restricted to a privileged few. Canaanite festivals were memorable events, watered down with abundant wine. Archaeologists have found impressive wineries in several cities, some capable of storing thousands of liters. But there was something more disturbing: evidence of ritual use of hallucinogenic substances in certain temples. Priests and priestesses consumed psychotropic preparations to commune with the gods. These altered states of consciousness were interpreted as divine possession, allowing priests to transmit messages from the heavens, a practice that the God of Israel vehemently condemned. The architectural achievements of the Canaanites were remarkable for their time. Jericho, one of the oldest cities in the world, had impressive walls up to 6 meters high, built with advanced engineering techniques. Some cities developed rudimentary aqueduct systems to supply water, channeling springs through underground tunnels to central cisterns. The temples dedicated to Baal and Astarte were imposing structures with high altars for sacrifices and courtyards surrounded by stelae and symbols of fertility. The famous Asherah poles, mentioned in the Bible as abominations, were also present. The justice system in Canaan was brutal and direct. A king had absolute power over life and death, often acting as supreme judge. Punishments for crimes included fines for minor offenses, but quickly escalated to mutilations and public executions. Family revenge was institutionalized, with the principle of an eye for an eye applied literally. Historical accounts mention Canaanite kings who cut off the thumbs and big toes of defeated enemies, exactly as happened to Adoni-Bezek in the book of Judges, who confessed to having done the same to 70 kings before receiving the same treatment. Physical appearance was extremely valued in Canaanite society. Men and women wore colorful tunics dyed with purple and crimson, extracted from mollusks and insects, colors that symbolized power and wealth. The noble women adorned themselves with elaborate jewels, earrings, necklaces, and anklets of gold and silver, often encrusted with lapis lazuli and carnelian. Relationships in Canaan followed patterns that the Israelites considered deeply immoral. Besides arranged marriages, which were the norm, powerful men kept concubines and sexual slaves. During religious festivals dedicated to Astarte, ritual, prostitution was practiced as a way to guarantee fertility for the land. Temples maintained priestesses who in reality were cult prostitutes. Homosexuality was recorded not only as a personal practice, but also integrated into certain religious rites. Divorce existed, but was extremely unfavorable to women, who lost rights over children and properties. Life in Canaan was often shortened by devastating diseases. The lack of basic sanitation, with garbage and excrement accumulated in the narrow alleys of the cities, created ideal conditions for epidemics. Medical practices mixed the use of medicinal herbs with magical rituals directed to the gods of healing. Leprosy was particularly feared, leading to the complete isolation of the sick who were forced to live outside the walls of the city, a practice that would later be incorporated into Mosaic law, but for reasons of public health, not superstition. If you understood why the Lord commanded the conquest of Canaan, write in the comments, "Your ways are higher, Lord," and share this video so that others can also understand the divine plans, the bloody gods, and the daughters of Canaan. Religion and women in the Promised Land. At the heart of Canaanite culture was a religious system that permeated every aspect of life. The pantheon was dominated by El, the father of the gods, but the true popular devotion was directed to Baal, the powerful god of storm and fertility, and his consort Astarte, or Asherah, goddess of fertility, love, and war. The Canaanites believed that the annual cycle of drought and rain represented the death and resurrection of Baal, and that the correct rituals could influence these divine forces. Canaanite temples were imposing structures, usually built on the highest points of the cities, the famous high places mentioned repeatedly in the Bible as centers of idolatry. These temples had courtyards for public rituals, altars for sacrifices, and secret areas where only priests could enter. Archaeological excavations have revealed statues of Baal wielding lightning and of Asherah nude, emphasizing her sacred sexuality. The most disturbing aspect of this religion was sacrifices. Animal sacrifices were routinely offered, but in moments of extreme crisis, prolonged droughts, epidemics, or threats of invasion, the Canaanites resorted to human sacrifice. Archaeological evidence confirms the horror of the Moloch, the practice of sacrificing children, usually firstborns, to Moloch, a manifestation of Baal. In Carthage, a Phoenician colony that preserved Canaanite practices, archaeologists discovered the Tophet, a cemetery with thousands of urns containing cremated remains of sacrificed children. Fertility rituals constituted another central element of Canaanite religion. It was believed that the sexual union between Baal and Astarte brought fertility to the earth. This myth was ritually staged in the temples, where priests and priestesses performed sexual acts as a way to encourage the gods to do the same. Sacred prostitution was institutionalized, with men and women dedicated to serving in the temples as cult prostitutes, practices vehemently condemned in the Torah. The Canaanite religious calendar revolved around the agricultural cycles. The most important festival was the New Year, celebrated in the autumn, when the first rains were expected to arrive. During these festivals, the consumption of alcohol and ritual drugs was common, leading to altered states of consciousness interpreted as divine possession. And within this deeply religious society, women had a fundamental role, although deeply contradictory. The life of women in Canaan was shaped by the duality between veneration and oppression. On the one hand, femininity was revered through the cult of Astarte. On the other hand, most women lived under strict patriarchal control. This contradiction defined everyday feminine life in all aspects. Marriage in Canaan was essentially a commercial agreement between families. A young woman had little voice in the choice of her husband, with the marriage arranged by her father, who negotiated a price for the bride to be paid by the family of the groom. Documents discovered in Ugarit, a Canaanite city, reveal marriage contracts detailing these financial arrangements. Once married, the woman passed from the authority of the father to that of the husband. Excavations in some Canaanite cities have revealed luxurious tombs of women, suggesting that some occupied positions of power. In certain city-states, queens ruled after the death of their husbands, while their children did not reach adulthood. Egyptian texts mention queens of Canaan, with whom the pharaohs maintained diplomatic correspondence. In daily life, the Canaanite women were responsible for maintaining the home, preparing food, weaving, caring for children, and various agricultural tasks. The textiles produced by Canaanite artisans were renowned, with fabrics dyed purple being a luxury item exported to Egypt and Mesopotamia. Show Jesus that you value his teachings on how to protect women and children. Comment, Jesus protects the innocent. But beyond the social and religious issues, Canaan was a place of constant war, where neighboring cities faced each other in endless conflicts. Walls that fall. War in Canaan and the arrival of Joshua war was not an exception in Canaan. It was the rule. The sound of trumpets announcing enemy attacks and the shine of armor under the scorching sun were part of the daily life. Each city-state aspired to expand its territory, control trade routes, and subjugate neighbors. Fertile plains, water springs, and strategic passages were constant motives for conflict. A city could be an ally in one season and a mortal enemy in the next, as alliances changed with the speed of desert winds. Canaanite armies were relatively advanced for their time. The military elite consisted of professional warriors equipped with bronze armor, shields, spears, and bronze or swords. Archers formed a line of fearsome attack, while slings reached enemies from a distance with deadly stones. But the true military pride of Canaan was their war chariots, light vehicles pulled by 2 horses, transporting a driver and an armed warrior. These tanks of antiquity dominated the battles on the plains, allowing quick and devastating attacks. Canaanite cities invested enormously in defensive fortifications. Jericho, one of the oldest settlements in the world, had impressive double walls with up to 6 meters high and 3 meters thick. Archaeological excavations revealed massive defensive towers and complex gates designed to hinder invasions. The city of Lachish had a system of double walls and an internal ramp that allowed defenders to move quickly to respond to attacks at different points. These defensive structures were so impressive that the Israelites, when viewing them for the first time, felt like grasshoppers compared to the locals. Canaanite war tactics were sophisticated, combining chariot attacks with infantry maneuvers. Sieges were common, with invaders building ramps against the enemy walls, a tactic adopted by the Assyrians and Babylonians in later periods. The Canaanites also mastered the art of psychological warfare, using terror to subjugate adversaries. Historical records tell that the victorious kings often exhibited decapitated heads of enemy leaders at the city gates or impaled prisoners on stakes along the roads as a warning. Despite their ferocity in battle and advanced military technology, the Canaanites suffered from a fatal weakness: their inability to unite. The Amarna letters reveal Canaanite cities fighting each other even when threatened by external invaders. While my neighbor falls, I prosper, seemed to be the prevailing mentality. This fragmentation meant that potential invaders could defeat each city-state in isolation without facing a coordinated response. And it was in this scenario of chaos that Joshua and the Hebrews arrived. After 40 years wandering through the desert, the Israelites finally contemplated the Promised Land. For them, Canaan was not just another territory to be conquered. It was the fulfillment of a divine covenant made to Abraham generations before. The land that flowed with milk and honey represented not only material abundance, but the place where they could finally live according to the laws of their God, free from Egyptian oppression and the idolatrous temptations found during their journey. When the Hebrews crossed the Jordan, they found a country divided and vulnerable. The first city to fall was Jericho, whose legendary walls collapsed miraculously after the Israelites marched around them for 7 days. This event, recorded in the Book of Joshua, marked the beginning of a military campaign that would forever change the face of Canaan. Hazor, Lachish, and other important cities fell successively. The conquest was not just military, it was a cultural and spiritual revolution. Where once stood temples to Baal and Astarte, now the people of Israel worshipped Yahweh, the one God. Canaanite festivals of fertility were replaced by celebrations such as Passover and Tabernacles, which commemorated the liberation and divine provision. Practices such as human sacrifice and ritual prostitution were abolished, replaced by a moral code based on the Ten Commandments and the Law of Moses. The clash between Hebrew and Canaanite values could not be deeper, where the Canaanites saw capricious gods who needed to be appeased with blood. The Israelites knew a God who established a covenant with his people, while Canaanite religion revolved around the natural cycles and fertility. The Hebrew faith was based on historical events and direct revelation. The Canaanites sought to control their gods through rituals. The Israelites were called to obey their God through righteous lives. Archaeology confirms that this period witnessed a radical transformation. Excavations show a sharp decline in Canaanite. Religious artifacts, statuettes of Astarte, altars to Baal, and the emergence of a distinct material culture characterized by the absence of images and idolatrous symbols. New villages emerged in the mountainous regions with different architectural patterns and absence of pork bones commonly found in Canaanite settlements. The conquest was not instantaneous nor total. The Book of Judges reveals that many Canaanites remained in the land, and their cultural and religious influence continued to tempt the Israelites for generations. This tense coexistence is confirmed by archaeological findings, showing a mixture of cultural practices in some settlements of the period. If you believe that God continues to fight spiritual battles to fulfill his purposes in your life, comment, "The Lord of hosts fights for me. God spoke to you today." This message about Canaan was not by chance, it was a calling. Click now on the video on the screen about what life was like in Sodom and Gomorrah. The truth that few have the courage to tell. You will discover shocking secrets that explain why God acted with justice and how this applies directly to your life today.